You rehearse what you are going to say before you walk into a room. You replay what you said after you leave. You adjust your personality depending on who is sitting across from you, louder here, quieter there, agreeable everywhere, and at the end of the day, you are not even sure which version was real. This is the exhausting reality of living for an audience that never paid for a ticket. The Stoics built an entire philosophy around freeing yourself from exactly this, and it starts with understanding one thing that changes everything. You were not born caring what people think about you. If you watch any toddler in a park, you will see a human being who is completely indifferent to the concept of a social reputation. They dance when they hear music regardless of who is watching, they say exactly what they mean without filtering for politeness, and they cry when they are sad without an ounce of shame. They are biologically wired to express their internal state without checking the room for permission first. Somewhere between that childhood freedom and the person you are now, you learned a hard lesson that other people's reactions are your responsibility. This was not a natural development, but a form of conditioning that was trained into you by every adult who asked what the neighbors would think or every peer who laughed when you stood out. You were taught that your safety and your success depend entirely on how well you can mirror the expectations of the people around you. This constant surveillance has become so internal that you probably do not even realize you are doing it anymore. You think you are just being polite or professional, but in reality, you are performing a role. The Stoics identified this trap clearly over 2,000 years ago. Epictetus taught that it is not things that disturb us, but our judgments about things, and this applies directly to the fear of judgment. When someone looks at you with disapproval or leaves a harsh comment on your work, that event is neutral. It is just a sound or a set of pixels. The pain only begins when you reach out and pick up their opinion, deciding that it contains information about your actual value as a human being. You have been trained to treat their judgment as data about your worth, but the Stoics realized it is actually only data about the person doing the judging. Their opinion is a reflection of their biases, their bad day, and their limited perspective, yet you carry it around as if it were a heavy stone you are required to hold. You are not weak for feeling this way because this conditioning is deep, but you must realize that this behavior can be reversed. The modern version of this social performance is most visible in the way we interact with technology. You post a photo or a thought online and find yourself checking your phone 15 minutes later. Not because you are looking for new information, but because you are looking for validation. The number of likes or shares is not actually data about the quality of what you said or the beauty of where you were, but you treat it like a scoreboard for your life. You have been trained to measure yourselves by the room's reaction, even when the room is filled with strangers you will never meet. But here is where it gets interesting, because not every opinion deserves the power you are giving it. And the Stoics had a brutal filter for separating the ones that matter from the ones that are just noise. We often make the mistake of treating all opinions as if they have equal weight. We give the same power to a passing comment from a stranger on the street as we do to the feedback of a trusted mentor. This is a form of social insanity that ruins your peace of mind. Marcus Aurelius ruled the entire Roman Empire and had millions of people who either loved him or hated him. Yet he wrote in his private journals about how worthless the approval of the crowd truly was. He sat in the imperial box at the Colosseum and watched gladiators receive standing ovations one day only to be forgotten or executed the next. He saw firsthand how quickly public adoration turns to contempt and how the same people who cheer for you will be the first to walk over you when you fall. He concluded that building your identity on other people's applause is the same as building your house on shifting sand. If your happiness depends on their praise, then your happiness is a hostage that they can take away at any moment just by changing their minds. The Stoics suggest a more practical filter for the opinions you encounter. When you catch yourself worrying about what someone thinks, you must ask yourself two very specific questions. First, do you actually respect this person's judgment in other areas of life? Second, Do they have enough context about your situation to have an informed opinion? If you look at the people whose judgment you fear, you will often find that you would not even go to them for basic advice, yet you allow their disapproval to ruin your entire week. Seneca wrote that we should not be concerned by the opinions of those whose own lives are in disorder, which is a logic we often ignore in our daily rush for approval. You are frequently taking direction and seeking validation from people who cannot even steer their own ship. If someone is miserable, judgmental, and constantly complaining about others, why would you ever want their approval? Their like is actually a sign that you are becoming more like them, which should be a warning rather than a reward. Most of the people whose judgment you fear are not even thinking about you at all because they are far too busy worrying about what everyone else thinks of them. You walk around believing a spotlight is shining directly on you, highlighting every flaw and every awkward sentence. But everyone else is holding their own spotlight and pointing it at themselves, and you are just a background character in their story who gets 5 seconds of attention before they return to their own anxieties. Once you realize how few opinions actually deserve your attention, the next question is harder. What has living for the rest of them actually cost you? This is where the philosophy turns from an intellectual exercise into a necessary survival strategy. Every time you say yes to an invitation when your body is screaming, "No," you are not being a good friend. You are abandoning yourself. You are telling your own soul that its needs are less important than the potential disappointment of another person. Every time you stay quiet during a conversation because you are afraid your real opinion will cause a ripple of discomfort, you are choosing their temporary comfort over your own integrity. You are handing over the keys to your mind and letting strangers rearrange the furniture. You protect your car, your home, and your wallet with locks and passwords, but you leave the gates of your inner world wide open for any passing stranger to walk in and rearrange everything. The cost of this constant performance is not just an abstract feeling of stress, it shows up in the tangible reality of your life. It is the career you have stayed in for 5 years too long because leaving would mean admitting failure to people you do not even like. It is the relationship you stay in because you are more afraid of what people will say about your divorce than you are of the silence in your own home. It is the voice you have effectively silenced because you calculated the social cost of speaking up and decided that staying invisible was cheaper. Epictetus said that if a person gave away their body to a passerby, they would be furious. Yet we hand our minds to anyone who insults us and let them disturb our thinking without any resistance at all, and that is exactly what you are doing every time you let a stranger's raised eyebrow rewrite your decisions. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the brevity of life, reminding himself that soon he would have forgotten everything, and soon everything would have forgotten him. The people whose approval you are chasing today will not even remember your name in 50 years. You are editing the only life you will ever have for an audience that is not even paying attention to the script. The person you are performing for does not even exist as a single entity. They are a composite of every authority figure, every old bully, and every social group that ever made you feel small. You are still answering to ghosts. You are making decisions based on the perceived expectations of a crowd that is largely indifferent to your existence. The Stoics argue that the only way to break this cycle is to realize that your character is the only thing you actually own. Everything else, your reputation, your status, your bank account, can be taken away by luck or by the whims of others. But how you choose to act and what you choose to value is entirely within your control. So how do you actually stop? Not with affirmations or mantras. The Stoics had something that works because it forces you to prove it to yourself. They knew that you cannot think your way out of a social phobia. You have to act your way out of it through a process of deliberate exposure to the very things you fear. This is not the kind of advice that tells you to just stop caring, because that is impossible to do by sheer force of will. Instead, the Stoics practiced a method of voluntary discomfort and social disobedience. Epictetus used to teach his students to practice doing things that might invite a small amount of ridicule or confusion from others. He wanted them to see that the sky does not fall when someone thinks you are a bit strange. This might mean saying the unpopular thing in a meeting, not because you want to be difficult, but because it is what you actually believe is true. It might mean wearing something that you love, but that you know does not fit the current trend of your social circle. It means disagreeing with someone you normally defer to just to experience the sensation of standing your ground. Each act of social disobedience is evidence that you are gathering for your own mind. You are proving to yourself that the consequences you have spent years fearing either do not arrive or, if they do arrive, they do not have the power to destroy you. The method is exposure, not affirmation. You do not overcome the fear of judgment by telling yourself you are a confident person while sitting alone in your room. You overcome it by doing the very thing you are afraid of being judged for and discovering that you survive the aftermath. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding yourself in the ranks of the insane. He understood that consensus is often just a polite word for collective madness. If everyone around you is living in fear and chasing status they do not need, then being judged by them is actually a sign that you are doing something right. It is a sign that you have stepped out of the ranks. This is not about being a contrarian for its own sake, or being rude to people. It is about refusing to let the average opinion of the room replace your own capacity for reason. Seneca practiced this by deliberately living below his means in public. He was a wealthy man, yet he would periodically set aside several days to eat the cheapest food and wear the roughest clothes, placing himself in situations where people would look at him with pity or disdain. He was not performing humility for an audience. He was conducting a private experiment. He wanted to know if his peace of mind depended on the fine silk of his robes or the respect that his wealth commanded. He found that his soul was just as steady when he was being ignored as when he was being praised. He realized that once you have faced the thing you fear, in his case, poverty and social shame, and found that you are still yourself, the fear loses all its teeth. You can apply this daily. You can catch the exact moment you are about to adjust your behavior for someone else's comfort. You can feel the fake laugh forming in your throat because someone made a joke that was not funny, but you want them to like you. You can feel the yes forming in your mouth when you know you need to say no. In that specific moment, you have a choice. You can follow the old conditioning and perform, or you can do the honest thing instead. Do not do it to prove a point or to be aggressive. Just do it to see what happens. What happens is almost always nothing. The person might look at you with a moment of confusion, or they might even respect you more for your honesty, but the world does not end. That nothing is where your freedom lives. It is the realization that the prison you have been living in was never actually locked. You were staying inside because you were afraid of a guard who was not even there. You have been waiting for permission to be yourself from people who do not have the authority to give it. The realization is not that other people do not matter, but that their opinion of you is not your problem to solve. You were given one life, and you have been spending it as a rough draft, constantly editing yourself based on notes from people who are not even reading the final version. You have been shrinking your soul to fit into rooms that were never big enough for you in the first place. Think back to the person rehearsing what to say before walking into a room and replaying what they said after leaving, because that person is tired and that person is ready to stop. Epictetus was a slave for a significant portion of his life, yet he was freer than most people alive today because he understood that no one can take your peace of mind unless you hand it to them. You have been handing it out like flyers to anyone who passes by. You can stop. Not tomorrow, and not after you reach some new level of success or confidence. You can stop right now. You can decide that the only opinion that has to be lived with 24 hours a day is your own, and therefore it is the only one that gets a vote on how you spend your time. The world will continue to judge you regardless of what you do, so you might as well be judged for being who you actually are rather than for a performance that is exhausting you. If this helped, subscribe. There is more coming.